Welcome to Two Brothers Talking. I'm Israel.
And I'm Eli.
Joining us today is Arianne Yago. She's a communications analyst at Northern Arizona University, founder of the A. Yago Scholarship, member of NAU's Tri Alpha, a first generation honor society, member of EduCause's Young Professionals Advisory Committee, institutional representative for Arizona Women in Higher Education, and the reigning Miss Arizona Collegiate United States. Arianne, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you so much for both of you having me. This is such an honor and giving me a platform to kind of share my stories. And for anyone listening, I hope that you can kind of resonate with what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And on that note, can you talk to us a little bit about your upbringing? What was that like?
Definitely. I was born and raised in Hawaii. And in 2015, I made that trek to Arizona to pursue higher education at Northern Arizona University. And I, like Eli and Israel mentioned in my intro, I am a first generation college student. And for me, my grandfather on my dad's side was that champion and advocate for education. He helped fund my tuition up until I graduated with my undergraduate degree. And with his passing last July, I felt really lost. And when I was going through my degree program at NAU back in 2017, I believe, my parents told me, like, look, we're going to get a divorce. You're going to be on your own. We have to kind of make those sacrifices, and you're on your own. You have to be financially independent. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about education, is because that was my constant. It was the constant thing in my life when I felt like the rug was being taken away underneath from me. And that's why I want to be an advocate and make sure that education equity is something that is brought to the table.
Awesome. That's powerful.
Yeah. That's a tremendous upbringing.
Yeah.
Just the adversity you faced, right? And then rising above that. That's inspiring.
Yes. And and for many of us, many students, especially during this pandemic, school was almost a safe space for some of our students. Because some of our students, believe it or not, they were going through domestic violence or domestic abuse at home. Maybe they were the main caregiver during this pandemic when everyone was working and learning remote. And they had to tend to the other responsibilities, and school, being in school, was their getaway. And I want to encourage any of you that are listening out there that maybe relate to that. Like, you can do it, and put your nose to the grindstone, and you will be able to achieve amazing things, and education is going to help you get there.
Backing up just a little to kind of the parents saying, hey, you're on your own, kind of tied in with, I think, a lot of motivation and support from your grandfather you mentioned. Would there be a specific pinpoint, this was the moment, kind of like your aha, oh, this is what I want to go for?
I'm not going to lie, Eli, that happened very recently. I wasn't even in college when I had that epiphany. I was really lost after my grandfather passed away, and due to COVID and Hawaii's very strict regulations regarding all of that travel. I mean, he passed away last July when it was kind of starting to ramp up.
Wow.
And there were only allowed 10 family members at the funeral services. And it just didn't make sense for me to fly all the way over there. And I felt really lost. And I'm a young professional, and being a first generation young professional, I mean, my parents worked blue collar jobs, so they don't know what it's like to sit at a desk and have that professional setting and be able to thrive in a professional setting. So it happened very recently. And I'm not going to lie, this pageant system and being involved in this organization kind of helped me find my passion and purpose. And prior to being a communications analyst, I was in admissions, and I used to recruit in the Four Corners region as well as southeastern Arizona. And my main demographic of students were first generation, Navajo, Native American and Indigenous students, as well as Latinx students. And for the most part, they weren't able to get those resources. They didn't have a path to follow that would kind of cultivate a college going culture. A lot of them did not know what an SAT or ACT was, and it was really sad. And now that we basically went remote really fast within a matter of months, we are now forced to look at the kind of technological paradox that we have. We've made an awareness to ourselves that some of our students are not going to have a laptop or reliable connection to Wi-Fi to engage in these classes. But it took a pandemic for all of us to realize that, but it was happening for eons. And I think me being that one person in that student's life to kind of help them navigate their future, regardless if that was higher ed or not, was empowering to me. And it was kind of baking at that point, baking, marinating. I really love connecting with students and meeting them where they're at and connecting them to resources and sharing them my story. It was not too long ago that I had this epiphany that this is what I wanted to do. And recently I just submitted an application for Arizona State University's doctoral program in leadership and innovation, where hopefully my dissertation talks about those equity gaps in education. Because all of a sudden it was just like, maybe this is my calling. And I think that a higher being and my grandfather were looking down and were like, here's this pageant opportunity. It just happened to be a pageant organization that helped me find my why.
Well, that's awesome. And I think that's definitely something, like you said, it's been happening for some time. I think that gap in knowledge or even really direction towards opportunity, because being first generation, you know that without that support system, there's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of, what's my next step, or how do I, you're kind of given pages and pages of, okay, here's what you have to do. You're like, that's great, but how do I do this?
Yeah.
How do I bridge these gaps?
Yep.
How do I get from where I am to where I want to go? And there's a lot of people that I don't want to say are forgotten because I don't know that they were considered to begin with.
And that's the whole thing, is that they don't have a seat at the table. And we make so many decisions in education as a whole, K through 20, without those students being represented. And it's really unfortunate. And hopefully with that degree backing me up, I can help be that change agent that helps those students have a voice when big decisions, high level decisions are being made. And it's something that I'm like, let's go. I don't know what we're waiting for. Let's do it.
Well, it sounds like they were waiting for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like usually if there's something you're passionate about, and you're like, okay, guys, where are the people to handle this? Well, it sounds like you might be the best person to lead that ship.
Thank you. I hope I'm definitely, and I'm young. I'm here to learn, and I want to engage, but I also want to bring a whole new side of what education looks like and feels like, because I think that we need to start collaborating with our communities, with our families, parents, guardians, as well as education administrators, to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because yes, a lot of the times too, parents like to be like, okay, well, that's the teacher's job, so I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And we just need to have like that same supportive front on all ends. And I know that it's a perfect scenario, and I know it's going to take some time and a lot of funding and a lot of external variables that kind of play into that situation and equation, but we need to start somewhere.
No, absolutely. And you point out, like, barriers are everywhere, not only in front of us right now, but possibly behind us. And many first generation students, or students in general, face a number of barriers. You yourself faced some personal barriers. Talk to us about what that path looked like. Did you almost quit?
So when I got my degree, and for many of us, right, once we get that like $70,000 piece of paper and we walk across that stage, I'm like, that paper over there is the most expensive thing that I own. I thought a job was going to just fall into my lap. And I thought I was going to have people contacting me like, hey, you now recently graduated, and like, I'm here, here's your job offer, here's what, our compensation and our benefits. Yeah, that didn't happen. And it took a long time for me to even get a job. I got no after no after no. And it was so discouraging. And no one really kind of helped me navigate what that was going to look like and be mentally prepared for all of those rejections. Because it does take a toll after some time. Yes. And about 6 or 7 months in the application process, I got a call back. I got an interview. And that interview process was very tedious. You sat down with like a 30-minute interview with the immediate team that was going to be choosing the candidate. Then you did a 30 to 45-minute presentation in front of the whole staff in that department. And then you had another interview after that presentation with the leadership team of that department. And it was very tedious. Went all the way there, got my no, and then that person rejected that offer. So then I was their backup, and it almost worked perfectly. And there were many times where I was like, I'm not ready for this. I don't know how to act, and I'm under 5 feet. I'm also a woman of color, and being in a space where you're young, kind of feel like all of these things, all of these layers are being built up against you. It was hard for me to break through. And then I moved into something that I never thought I saw myself doing, which was in information technology services, and even more so with that being a traditionally white male type of field. I walked in and I was like, well, I'm just not going to say anything. And it took some time for me, and this is why I want to encourage our listeners today, is take those risks. I am in a completely technical field, but I'm finding little niches that I can apply and use my talents. And also, don't criticize yourself so much. The world is already hard as is.
Yes.
And putting all of these, and part of it too was my own mentality going into it. I made myself feel uncomfortable. I made myself like I felt unincluded in the conversation. But once I started gaining that confidence and finding my groove, I was able to like actually have a voice. And that's where the respect came in. So it's like part of it is our environment, but also is our mentality. And that's what I love about first gen students and students that maybe have had a lot of adversity, is that you learn something, and it's called failure. And with that failure, we learn to rise up. We learn how to be tenacious. We learn resiliency. And that is something that nothing else but failure can teach us. And I've failed a lot. It wasn't always perfect. It wasn't always perfect. A lot of people stereotype women in pageantry being like these pedestal people that we need to worship. But no, we all have our flaws, and it applies to both your professional and personal lives.
I think it was Einstein who said, if you show me a man who's never failed, I'll show you a man who's never tried anything worth significance. And I think if there's one thing we can really take, sometimes for granted is, oh, I failed, I guess I'm not going to do it. Well, that's not really the right approach. You have to be willing to fail over and over and over. We both know that we've gotten more than a few no's when we've applied for positions, or we've tried things and it just blew up into flames. And to kind of laugh it off, sometimes I'll just say, if you at first you don't succeed, you're not Chuck Norris. This wasn't your first try, so you got to keep going. But I think a lot of folks can sometimes miss the extra barriers that are there for, as an example, like you said, people who are of certain color, of a certain gender, sometimes they can face difficulties, or even culturally difficulties. And sometimes that cultural stepping out of, I know this is how it's been, but I need to step out of what has been and move into a new direction, to your point, is scary.
We can recruit as many diverse students as we can too. Like that's great for numbers, but the most important number than having someone matriculate is retention. How are we going to keep these students and engage in these students? And a lot of higher education systems now are starting to engage and create those safe spaces, but we also need mentoring. And I think that's why, and I've had a lot of mentors in my life, and I think that's why I attribute all of my success. That's who I attribute all of my success to, because of course I was lost. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And if you're lost, your confidence is not going to be up in the air. Like it's not going to be booming out of the sky. You're going to feel like a little more timid, like, oh my gosh, do I take this route? Do I take this route? And I think that's more important than being successful in school. There's a whole different atmosphere than just being successful in school. It's how are you growing as a person? And that's what higher education, I think that's why I love it so much too, besides being in academics, is that you learn and you build that identity capital. And for many students, this is their first big city that they're going to see. And you bring up a good point, Eli, too, is that sometimes, and for the most part, it's not in Native American Indigenous students' culture to go to college. And I respect that. I respect that a lot. And a lot of the times, too, is that we have this misconception that they're not going to retain anyway. So why do we just try, waste university resources even trying to recruit out there? There would be times where I would be the only recruiter they would see in a matter of months.
Wow.
And it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Yes, if they want, and a lot of the times too, there's a misconception that Native students are just not going to, they're not going to retain. They don't have enough resources. They can't afford it. This, that, and the other. I can name you a laundry list of things, but we should be giving them the opportunity. We should be giving them the opportunity to engage and help them navigate that next step, because a lot of them, they have no idea. And it's sad. And we also then don't set them up for success once we recruit them, to providing them those support systems, to providing them those resources that are going to take them to the next level, and then also walk across that graduation stage. So that's just my 2 cents.
Well, and I think it's a good 2 cents to have. And I love that you pointed on a word that we use a lot, and one that I think is very critical and a lot of people may overlook, is support system.
Yes.
You have to have a support system, whether it's something that you find, inside the family, outside the family. A support system is really a huge necessity. And I want to talk a little bit about, if we can, your A. Yago scholarship. I know that was named after your grandfather. I believe his name was Antonio. And can you share kind of the impact? He was very much your support system in college, if I heard right, and I apologize if I didn't.
He definitely was. And when I started getting older, I realized, darn, he's getting older. And he was that person that would always be there, make me laugh, but also give me that constructive criticism. And he was just that person that I could always rely on. And when my parents were going through it, I would call him or write letters. And even though he wasn't the most technology savvy person out there, we did find ways to connect. And being able to also build a family in Arizona was so integral to my success, because my family's 2,000 miles away.
Yeah.
And what I learned too, because that was a traumatic experience for me, is that I'm at this point in my life where family doesn't always mean blood. Family can be your friends. It can be your colleagues. It can be your mentors. It's going to be your tribe that is going to lift you up in times of success, but most importantly, lift you up in times of failure. And without my support system, I don't think I would have stayed, because I'm not going to lie, like, homesickness is a thing, right? And my first year, it started getting colder and it started getting darker faster. And in Hawaii, you don't have 4 seasons. It's also always sunny, beautiful all the time. You're like, woo, December, wait, this is great. And it snowed for the first time in Flagstaff. And I called my parents. I was like, look, you guys need to take me home. I'm not staying here anymore. I don't know why I even came here. You guys need to figure this out and get my butt on a plane. And they told me no. They told me no. And I'm grateful that they did, because it allowed me to establish that sense of self and find my community here. And I'm forever grateful, because I would have left so easily. And that's something so important too, is finding the people around you that are going to help support you no matter what, because it's so easy to throw in the towel.
It is.
It's so easy. It's so easy. And you're tempted throughout your life to just be like, nope, I'm done. Next move. But I think part of the reason too, and this is why it's so important, I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and transition into networking. Sometimes, actually most of the time, people are not just going to come to you and be like, do you want to be my best friend? Here, I'm going to support you on this endeavor. Oh, here, I'm going to lend you a lot of, mentorship opportunities. You have to network, and you have to find those people. LinkedIn is such a powerful tool. And students, I know you're probably sitting there cringing if there are any students listening, but it is such a powerful tool. You can connect with your school's alumni. You can connect with people in job fields that you possibly want to go to. Use that and leverage that. Also, reach out, be active. I'm personally an introvert, and I know that's really hard to tell, but in a social setting, I'm one to just kind of sit, monitor the room, be like, oh, okay, cool. And I would wait until someone approached me. And my success rate is very slim doing that. So I encourage you to start networking. And I wish schools help students gain those skills earlier.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Because it's something transferable that's going to carry you through the rest of your life when you're done with academia, when you're done working a professional position. So many ways.
Networking has done phenomenal things for my personal, my professional life. We call it our circle of friends, but namely, they're those folks that are going to be there to hold you accountable. They're going to have your back. They're going to be there in your failures, like you mentioned. They're going to celebrate you in your successes, but they're also going to be your advocates when you're not in the room. When if it's a professional setting and someone's talking about we have this job available, they're going to think back, Arianne, we had several conversations about this. Eli, he has this skill set. He's going to be your best candidate. Why don't you interview him? Even outside a professional setting, if someone is talking about you behind your back, they can be your advocate and say, you know what? I know Arianne. I know Eli. I know their character. That's not them. And they can change the narrative. And so having that skill set is so crucial that, like you said, it's not taught and it's seldom seen. They hold, freshman mixers or what have you, but it's just people talking and chatting. There's no purpose behind it. So framing that and taking advantage of the current setup and having alumni come in or professionals come in that know how to market skills, that know how to communicate effectively, and kind of take lead in that conversation. Say, hey, so-and-so, come over here. There's this group of people that I think you'd hit off with, or maybe completely not hit it off with, but you can learn from each other. I think that's important to listeners and watchers on YouTube. Take note of that and evaluate, do you have that skill set? And if not, let us know so we can give you more opportunities to learn about that.
Yeah. And I think that's something that didn't translate into the digital world very well. And I bring that up because I'm a big history buff. I just have ridiculous swaths of historical information that mean absolutely nothing in reality. But what we did, back in my day before the internet, there were apprenticeships, and families would look out for apprenticeships and say, okay, I want to put my son with this, mason because I want him to become a mason. I want him to be able to take care of his family. And they would send children to apprenticeships or to schools to learn trades and get a thing that they could do to take care of their family. But I think one thing that's been kind of a missing for the digital age is we see the need, but the tools are very shortcoming. And like you said, LinkedIn is a fantastic asset for that. And to the younger generation, it's like, oh, LinkedIn. It's like we have to realize that that is the new kind of parent going out looking for an apprenticeship. That's the new person that's saying, hey, we have to put ourselves out there. If you don't, like you said, if you don't network, you're not going to get a good catch. It's almost like sitting on a boat with a bucket and saying, here, fish. That's not how this works. You have to go out there and you have to seek it. And sometimes you have to pull in empty nets, but you're still getting your name out there. You're still saying, hey, I'm Eli. Here's what I'm about. Here's what I can do for your company. And you have to build those. But I think it's something that needs to transition from the analog world into the digital age a little bit, because like you said, we don't teach it in schools. It's not something that's readily available to most people. It's not really something that's at the forefront of what people think about. But then when you get into the professional world, when we started networking, we're like, oh man, we need to network. You're not going to succeed if you don't know people. And it's not so you can, get in the back door and be like, haha, I got hired because I knew, John Smith. But it's simply getting your name out there and building your professional, we call professional brand. Kind of getting out there saying, hey, this is what Eli's about. This is what Israel's about. Here's what they can do for your company. Here's what they can do for, your open position or what have you. But that's a must. And I feel like that's not something that transitioned very well into the digital world.
110%. And both of you make great points. I'm not gonna lie. I got my 2 positions because of word of mouth, because of networking. Because I was young. I was competing against people across the nation for these 2 positions. And they landed on, I started working professionally at 20 years old. They chose a 20-year-old over someone who has graduated from an Ivy League school trying to recruit at Northern Arizona University. And I want to use this dated slogan that it's who you know, not what you know. Because you can know a lot of things.
Yep.
You can know everything in the books. But if you have no networking bone in your body, that's going to it's going to be a disservice to you. It's going to take you somewhere. It's just not going to take you to the next level.
Yeah.
And I think too, as more Generation Z individuals enter the professional workspace, hopefully that kind of answers that problem, Eli, because we have a hard time being on the employer end recruiting those types like Gen Z individuals.
Yeah.
Because you want to know why? They're all on social media right now. They're not looking at LinkedIn for the most part. That's a totally like millennial Generation Y baby boomer type thing. So it's both of those parties need to start communicating together, because I think we're losing a lot of talent in the professional workspace because it's not connecting yet.
Yeah.
Employers and future employees it's just not connecting. And we need to solve that problem somehow. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's definitely a transition and almost a technological paradox. Because technology has brought us so many places, but it's also serving as a detriment to us in so many ways, because students are on TikTok. They're like, okay, where can I find jobs on TikTok?
Yep.
Like looking, because I guess, some people, strategic companies are on there promoting their brand. They're trying to, find that affinity. They're trying to have buy-in with Generation Z. But Generation Z also got to step up and like kind of play the game. You gotta play the game to be a successful person. You can't just wait and for it to fall in your lap. Be on a TikTok.
Yeah.
You have to start putting yourself out there.
I see a balance of, and I was a trainer for a number of years. So one thing that we looked at was there's always a disparity between two major skill sets. There's technical skills and then there's soft skills. One thing I see of the new generations is they have a lot of technical skills, but they have a serious wanting in the soft skills. And that's the interpersonal connection. That's the conversation, the ability to, even introverts like yourself, being able to say, okay, when do I have to step out of that comfort zone a little? And sometimes if I equate it to taking a phone call from an unknown number, chances are you don't take, a call from a number you don't know. Well, if that employer doesn't know you, you're an unknown number. There's no, there's nothing on their side that's saying, hey, I need to hire this person. I need to take this person more seriously. So you kind of have to work on the soft skills I see for the newer generations. And then for your point, the older generations, they had a lot more soft skills and they have to bridge the gap into the technical skills a little bit. So going on to the TikTok, but I think a lot of it's on the ownership of both sides to understand the importance of both and the balance therein, more than just saying, oh, well, we're great at soft skills. That's great. But the next generations aren't. So how can we get them involved? And then for the newer generations, how can we get our soft skills built back up? Because I see that as a large wanting, spending years training the younger generation. Some of them I was a substitute teacher for, which just blew my mind. And they would come into my classroom as a professional. I'd say, oh man, this person's all grown up. And they had the technical skills. But what we had to facilitate was the soft skills, building that interpersonal connection. I think that's, to your point, it's both sides. And I think a lot of it has to do with just the balance between those two.
Yep, and both parties need to kind of understand both backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for my generation, we basically grew up with these things in our hands, probably in elementary, maybe even younger. I see 2-year-olds with iPads and I'm like, whoa, what's happening here? But also employers, I mean, Gen Z need to understand about employers is that they're very still in the traditional mindset. They're still in the traditional way of recruiting employees. So it's kind of bridging that gap and playing both games at once and leveraging that. I feel like during my high school experience, during my collegiate experience, I didn't get that. So in part of education reform, it's also like going back, teaching those public speaking skills.
Mm-hmm.
A public speaking class would be great because a lot of students are not going to know how to approach a professional. There are so many times, because I used to teach an honors 100 class, which is like an introduction class for freshmen if they were in honors. They didn't even know how to write an email to professor, let alone speak to their professors. They just call them by their first name. And a lot of them have their doctorate degree. So you don't want to go ahead and be like, hey, John. And hierarchy me, hey John, how's it going? So it's just those little untalked about portions of skills that we need to start building and nurturing at a younger age, because this is only going to get you so far. If you can text, that's amazing. We love seeing you text like 90 words per minute on your phone. We love it. We love to see it. It's being also able to engage. And I think another thing too is that we're so intimidated. I myself was intimidated to talk to folks that were decades older than me. And there's like a gap there, obviously, in interests and whatnot and understanding. But being able to speak to someone that is more mature and has more experience and opening up, you learn both ways. It's a mutually beneficial relationship.
Absolutely. I want to ask, you're about to step onto the national stage in July, right? Compete for
Yes.
the title of Miss Collegiate United States. Has that being involved in the pageant, has it developed you further as a professional? And has anything you learned from the pageant been transferred from there and vice versa from the professional environment? Has it helped you communicate on the stage when you're public speaking? What do preparations look like for you?
I'm not going to lie. And most pageants have interview, right? And most jobs have interview. And how I kind of make those two worlds meet and collide is that at the end of the day, you're applying for a job.
Yeah.
I did not
In
ever think
July,
like that.
No, never.
yeah, in July, I'm applying for the job of Miss Collegiate United States. And instead of a salary, I'm getting a crown and sash and a platform, a national platform. For interviews for a professional setting, you're applying to get your job. And there's so many times where, you know, when you talk and this is like your first interview, you can talk in circles all the time and you just don't connect. You don't tell your story. And I think through pageantry, where it has helped me in the professional setting is I get to share stories. And that's what's interesting about human beings is that for over millennia, we have been using storytelling as a way to captivate an audience. We have been using stories, and that's how we pass down our culture. That's how we pass down our heritage. And that still applies today. It's just no one really says or calls it out like, hey, tell me your story. Give me a storytelling lesson. Because when you're in a job interview, you're basically storytelling on all of the accolades, all of the things, all of your work experience, your professional experience, your whatever, to the hiring committee.
Yeah.
And I think where it has helped vice versa in the professional setting to pageantry is that I've grown like this kind of like self-confidence with it. Being able, because most of the time judges are not going to be the same age, remotely the same age as you are. And being in a professional setting, being able to engage and work and collaborate with older colleagues and whatnot, gives me that skill to be like, okay, I'm confident in front of this. I can talk to people that are way older than me. I can have mature conversations. Because also Gen Z too, we like to use, the typical lingo. Yeah, that's not going to fly when you're trying to talk to someone who, is in a baby boomer demographic or a Generation Y demographic. It's going to go right over their head. So being able to kind of finesse both worlds and take both transferable skills, I think has prepared me. And preparing for a pageant, believe it or not, is just like preparing for a sport competition. There are different aspects. You have interview, you have evening gown, sometimes you have talent, sometimes you have fun fashion. And another thing too is stage presence. And sometimes you can't teach that. And being able to light up a room is also something that could be beneficial in the workspace.
Yeah,
that's true.
So it's very tedious, practicing interview, asking those tough questions, tearing up your resume for crying out loud. And for specific organizations, they can ask you anything under the sun. They could ask you current events, politics, everything. So thankfully for this one, we don't have that. But they get to tear up your resume, and being able to kind of analyze that too and digest and take constructive criticism on both ends. Yeah. So important.
I feel like a lot of that ties into maturity. And to your point, a lot of the newer generations, it is definitely intimidating to sit in front of people, like I said, that are decades older, much more experienced. One thing I've found in the professional realm is there is a certain little bit of a stigma over those that are young, but I think it applies to a much greater degree when it's immaturity that's coming out. Because I've had people work for me, and I've worked with people that were young but mature. And I said, yeah, they're young, but they can do the job. They have the maturity. They can make wise decisions. I think it's when the immaturity starts coming out. And to your point, understanding the difference linguistically, like not saying like lol, like trying to land
Yeah.
rafflecopters or something. Like there's a disparity between how we text and how we should talk,
Yes.
especially in professional environment. I think that portraying the maturity would also do leaps and bounds more than just speaking how you would to a friend, because it's a very different environment. But yeah, I feel like it's been a really good conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure talking to both of you and sharing my story on this platform. And I can't wait for like more segments so I can watch it. And thank you folks for giving us an opportunity to share our stories on here with you folks.
Well, before we head out, I want to kind of give the open-ended, pour your heart out. Is there anything else you would like folks to know before we wrap up?
Goodness. For any of you folks listening, like I just appreciate it, that you're tuning into my story, but also as a young professional, as a young individual, and as a woman of color, it's been hard. I'm not going to lie. Going into the higher education setting and then being a young professional at the age of 20, I have failed and failed a lot, and I will continue to fail again. And I hope that encourages you to pick up where you left off and keep going. It's so easy to run. It's the easiest thing we can do, but there's so much that we can learn by staying. There's some strength in that. And I hope that wherever you are in your life right now, that you kind of carry that out and carry that with you.
Wow.
Thank you, folks.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing not only your inspiring story, but the journey that you took, being honest about the barriers that you faced and what you did to overcome them. And we're just looking forward to seeing you succeed.
Yeah.
Where can
Thank you.
folks go to follow you, to watch your journey unfold? Where can we support you
Sure.
at?
Yes. So I have an Instagram for my personal stuff, but I would definitely recommend checking out my Journey to Nationals, which is in almost a month, which is crazy.
Wow.
It's at Miss AZ Collegiate US on Instagram and Facebook. And if you want to follow me on my personal journey, it's at Arianne Yago on Facebook and Instagram. But thank you so
Awesome.
much again. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people. I have found my passion and purpose as Miss Arizona Collegiate United States, and that's just to connect with people. I just love it.